Good evening. Thank you for joining us. My name is Bradley Shaw from Shoreline Publishing Group. Coming up this month, we're releasing Shelley Cass's new book, The Last Laren D. It's a fairy trilogy. It's the first of the fairy trilogy. And Shelley's here today to talk to me and explain to you viewers as what the book is and what to expect when reading. So hello, Shelley. Welcome.
Thank you.
So tell me, what is The Last Laren D about, and what will we expect when people read it?
So The Last Laren D is about fairy tale characters, but in a more, I guess, mature world. It's not the kind of Sleeping Beauty or Disney tale. It's very much an epic, like a Lord of the Rings-esque kind of series. But it's got giants, it's got dwarves, it's got the fairies, it's got all of those fairy tale characters, but they're just pitted against each other in a war zone, I guess.
Very good. So I read through that, and yes, the originality of your characters struck me as a very exciting concept in an old styled genre. As you said, you referenced Lord of the Rings. So how did you find creating that unique characterization in a genre that's fairly well established like that?
I think everything I was doing, and I started writing this very young. I started writing the series when I was 14.
Wow.
So half my life ago. Over half my life ago.
Don't give us age, no.
Everything I was doing, I was trying to reflect on like different kinds of people that I'd seen, different culture, and like the different races, magical and mortal races. I just wanted them to kind of symbolize the division and the color and magic that happens in the real world.
Yeah.
Because my writing kind of reflects what I'm feeling and thinking and seeing, and I guess the thing I'm most afraid of is the disconnect in our world and between the peoples that really exist, and the greatest threat in this novel and in the series is division.
That's interesting. That's very good. Very delicate too. Like you'd have to construct that in a way that the characters are balancing that for the reader's interpretation without prejudice, I imagine, to try to keep perspectives, which is good. Very, very good. So as a reader, what when we enter your world and we enter into your mind, and as you say, it's a very young mind at the time of writing it, what elements do you feel, you hope that a reader really captures, really gets out of that from you?
I don't even know if I really mind if they pick up on the real world stuff. I just hope that they pick up on the fact that they're my way of coping with the real world stuff, like war and division, are the little everyday nice things, like the friendship between characters. The Last Laren D is the first of 3 books, and there's a prophecy that is interlaced throughout all of it, and it's about the 3 characters coming together. And there are 3 novels, and in each of the novels, one of the key 3 players kind of gets their turn to shine. And in this one, it's Kiana's turn. She's the huntress. And she was void of joy. She was, she'd gone through many tragedies. She'd become this hardened warrior. And in this novel, her growth comes from inner strength and friendship. And it's the nice things that I think I want people to feel the most. Good.
That's very, very nice. The time in prepping and planning a book series like this, did you feel it was something you had to spend that time on, or was it something that evolved as you wrote it, as you let the story tell you what was going to be the outline of the series? How did you find your writing process, I guess, is what I'm asking. For that.
Both.
Yeah.
Can
So was
I
it
be
a lot of
both?
planning? Was there a lot of ways of creating a world? Was there a lot of things you had to maybe study, but not so much study in the sense of its actuality, but the fantasy of studying it and creating it and
Yeah,
making it
I
logical?
think the way that writing happens to me is that I see, like, I just get this burst of vision. Like, I just see a moment, and the rest of the story has to then fall into place around that moment.
Yep.
So I'm not the writer who really knows what's going to happen. Unfortunately, it'd probably be nicer if I had a good timeline, but
Yep.
as each moment is revealed, and it can be like, maybe I see halfway through the book and then I've got to work out how to get there. That's where the planning and prep comes in.
Yep.
Like, I've seen where I'm heading. Now, how the heck do I get there?
Yep. And right backwards, you sort of keep going forwards, hoping, just sort of sifting through it as you go, developing it as you go.
Exactly.
And you find that takes a lot of revision. Like when you do have that draft, you've done the first path, and you think you've got there, then you go through it again and think, oh, hang on, I've got to.
What did I do?
I've got to cheat. Yeah, so you've got to change a little bit of strategy, but having that line helps you develop that process.
Yeah, I know what I want. That moment that I see, I cling to it. I know I need that, but definitely when you reread things, especially when you start as a 14-year-old, oh my God, some of the junk that I wrote.
Yeah.
And I was always one of those kids, and I still am, who, when you get your nice exercise book, you have to write a really nice heading. You have to get the right font. You have to, Yep. So I've been that person. Like, I would scrunch up that paper until that heading was pretty. And the same thing, like, I picked so many, like La Neredy. I know that that's a tricky name, but at 14, I thought that sounded so pretty. And all my other character names, I put a lot of research into, because I wanted to find names that had meaning from different cultures and history. But I can't tell you now, 15 years later, why I picked those names. I cannot remember.
I know the feeling. So having said that, like, did you write a lot of this in longhand as a child, as a kid, or did you type at that age? Like, because computers, had evolved and typewriters had started in that period. So you would have had access to fairly good systems of typing, but was it longhand or?
Yeah, it was. I filled notebook after notebook.
I was going to say.
Very beautifully covered notebooks, by the way. They were all.
That's something you can sell on eBay. There's a real draft, original drafts.
No, they're shocking.
Drafts. So tell me, just how long do you spend writing? Because obviously when you're a child, you have a little more time, but now as you've gotten older, naturally work, life, and I think if I recall in the conversation we had earlier, you were getting married soon. So, like, what sort of time do you have for writing? Like,
not much.
No. So how effective do you find your writing now? Like, as much as you love it, I'm sure.
Yeah, when you were saying before, are you a planner, or does it just kind of take you? I think I try to plan time that I can write, but it very rarely happens, because I'm a teacher as well. So my brain power goes into my students and my lessons and my marking. And then if I'm not a potato, I can maybe do just a little bit of time, but there's always social events or something. So finally, like, it almost helps me, even though I absolutely hate it. I get to such a point where I'm just so frustrated that I haven't had that creative outlet, that then those bursts, those visions happen, and then I can write.
And is that a frenzy where it might be a block of like 8 hours where you just boom?
Yes.
And just head down, and suddenly you have 50 pages. I'm not sure how fast you write or type, but like, 20 pages, whatever. And as you say, there's that release. Like, I'm so glad that's done. I hate
that, but maybe I need it.
So you don't actually have any timeline that plans into your writing process, which is interesting. And with those bursts, do you find that after you've had them and the space between them, that there's a need for revision, or you've forgotten new information, or you find that you've retained a lot of creative aspects of the book still? Because a lot of authors say that their inspirations or their aspirations are so clear that that stays with them for months. And when they actually sit down to write it, it's just a release. It's actually like everything's already in there. All the books already set up in their mind. Is that something you have? You have that sort of catalogue creativity in the time you're not writing, you're writing in your head? Does that make sense?
Yes. It's a lot of the time when I'm driving, which is terrible. But driving or, I think that's because that's when a good song will come across the radio that maybe you haven't heard before, and it gets different sparks happening in your brain. Yeah. I don't struggle to remember where I'm at creatively. I more go back and revise, because when I do get excited and I'm just blurting it all out, it's probably not top notch.
So it could be just that block of a chapter piece you need to express, and then you work out how to bridge that in to the main story later on or through the process. So
but I'm definitely a sticky notes person. I just fill up pages and pages.
Yes, I guess I've got a collection of those. So with that writing process, if you were one of the characters, who would you be? Can I ask you that? Ooh. Like who you relate to, like when you're writing as much. And you say there's 3 main characters in the 3 books. So how have you identified that familiarity or relationship with the character that you've got to create, but you already know so well as well, because there's an element when you write. So who would you be? Who would you feel is your most, I guess, strongest personality of you?
I think when I was a teenager, when I was first writing it, I probably wanted to be Kiana, because I was the very mousy, very shy, awkward in my own skin year 8 student. And she was so certain and so confident, but she has had so many tragedies. I don't want that.
Too hard.
I think too hard basket. Dallin is a good mix of kind of fun and serious, but I would probably be a Noel, who is the bumbler of the group, but also the comedic relief, brings everyone together.
Yep, very good. And so from that perspective, who would be your identifiable nemesis? And you don't have to name anyone, but I'm saying, is there a person in the book that has had an inspiration to a character that is not, a favourite of yours, that you've used because of those lesser likable traits?
It's more the thing. The characters in the book are, like, my villain's Agrona the Witch. I just love writing her. It'd be like, a Lady Macbeth. If you were an actress and were given Lady Macbeth, you would just love it. It would just be so fun. But the thing that I think I hate is the fact that there is, I resolve, or I aim to resolve, these real world issues like division and disconnection and sickness to nature. And I absolutely hate that I live in a modern world where these things aren't getting better, where we're pulling further apart, we're more polarized than ever and less willing to listen, and we're allowing our planet to fall apart around us, and we just can't see it. And I don't only hate it, it scares the daylights out of me, and that's why I need to cling to the little positives. Yeah,
absolutely. And of course you wrote this at 14 when you weren't probably as exposed to those huger issues that now you've had or seen or recognized yourself in your book, elements of that creation you've made, and in our present time, which is disappointing. I agree. But we won't get into politics. Let's not go there.
Not today. Oh my gosh.
So what was in your mindset, what do you feel was the hardest scene to write? As you say, you mostly had a lot of bursts, so there were a lot of bits that so you obviously had those bursts would have been filled with that excitement and inspiration and, as you said, need to write. But when you got to that, and it could even be through revision, going back over some of the work and cutting it out or improving it or finding it a challenge, what was the hardest parts or the hardest scenes in writing this book for you that you felt?
I think I worry sometimes that maybe the start can be tricky because it's world building. I think the hardest thing, originally when I first thought I was finished with this book, it was over double its size. It was a brick, this thing. Because I'd poured so much backstory in, and really that was only necessary for me, I guess. Like, people didn't need that. So the hardest thing was to work out what wasn't necessary, and to be cutthroat, and to just get into the story so that people wouldn't get bored with me describing a rock for 10 pages.
Yeah. So how did you, on that note, having, poured out so much narrative and so much creative that you felt was creative input at a young age, of course, that you weren't educated in that format of writing a novel, because, that's not something that's taught in school directly. So once you had this brick and you took it to an editor or even someone you trusted and got that first feedback, that first impression, what was your reaction when they said it was too much and you had to cut it? Like, how did you face editing?
Well, firstly, like, my mum and my neighbour at the time, power to them, they read the brick. They read that. That's how nice the people are around me.
Well, mothers are obligatory. I mean, they have to do that.
Yeah, but just gently, when they mentioned that it could be good to drop some of it, I just was frustrated at myself, because at that stage I was a newish teacher, but my whole job as an English teacher is to edit and critique and to help others shine and polish. And I was just thinking, why wasn't I not doing this for myself earlier? And once I changed my mindset from no, it's creative genius, which it never was, to chop, and do you need this? Then I just needed to switch hats a little bit. And I realized I do this for a career. I can do this. Yeah.
Well, that's it. Being a writer and being an editor are two different elements of the writing process. And that's where self-editing is probably the biggest challenge a lot of authors have. And also trusting and finding editors whose opinion and value into your book you trust, because that input and that review, especially of a genre, that you've effectively created a new world, has to have a certain editing style in appreciation and understanding of that purpose. And in a series particularly is challenging, because elements of your book in your first book have reference to seconds and thirds. And if an editor isn't engaging you in that consistent structural development, then that's a very big challenge as you as an author. So I respect that. It is hard. So with that in mind, what did you find? Do you find that the writing energizes you, or it exhausts you? What's your biggest sort of feeling about writing sometimes, like when you think, oh gosh, I've got to sit down and write this chapter? Or, as you say, do you just wait until it's so built up that the burst has to happen? Is that an energy that just comes, or is it an exhausted relief?
When the moment strikes and I can suddenly see what's coming, or that inspiration hits, that's so energizing and liberating. But then the filling in the gaps and just never feeling like you have enough time or brain capacity for it, or you feel a bit divided because you're at a family event and you should really appreciate your family, oh my gosh, and you're just at the same time going, oh, I really just don't have time. I sometimes feel like it's a burden, especially that I let 15 years go on this series. It was just kind of always weighing on me. And more recent books that I've had a go at, where I've just let them flow and I haven't overthought them, I've enjoyed that a lot more. But this series is my heart and soul because I put everything into it. So you put
everything of you as a young woman into it as well.
Exactly.
It wasn't just, and that's a very fragile, expressive period where you're on a journey of your own in self-discovery, let alone trying to create a world of discovery for a book.
So much angst.
I mean, there's a lot of connection emotionally to all this effort you put into that.
Yes.
And I respect that. That's a huge job in its own. With that, I was going to ask you a question. I have one. With the series, and this is something that always intrigues me, did you find, or have you found, now that you've completed it, that you've hidden things that readers will enjoy? There's things in there that little Easter eggs, I guess they're called, and Do you feel in hope that readers will find these and you're welcome to drop us a few little hints. But tell us, have you got a little, clue in a bed through your story, a little game for the readers?
I hope I do. I've tried. Just little subtle things that hopefully then add up later, like what exactly the 3 means and what their jobs are, what they're doing in the first and second book without realizing that then pays off in the third book. There's one beloved character called the Granks, and she is the most deadly spider to have ever existed, and she's deeply in love with Noel, who is phobic, and she follows him everywhere, and she has some pretty important jobs. She just seems like comedic relief at the start, but she has a big role to play. So hopefully there are little things. I think they're there. People might miss them though.
Well, no, I think you're right. I think they'll pick up their own nuances. Readers of the genre, particularly that genre, are very astute to that environment. They love that, getting immersed in that style. So if you know now what you know about your series, and you could go back to Shelley Cass at 14, what would you tell her about learning and becoming a writer? Like, what was potentially helpful then, knowing what you know?
I think
that's a big question.
Yeah.
How many things would you stay away from Billy Botts, he's a bad boy. Okay.
I think it was important to go through the phases that I went through, but maybe I would tell myself not to overthink it so much and to question and doubt so much.
But a teenage girl. You're going to tell a teenage girl not to overthink something.
I know. I mean, it was just life-changing to realise that you could do it, that, it's there, you can make a book.
So when you were doing it, you didn't have a vision, you didn't have a goal, you didn't think to yourself, I'm going to be an author, I'm going to be a writer, I want to get this
I wanted
story
that.
out there.
I did want that a lot. But it was more about just that soul-burning need to get it out, and I almost didn't have a choice. I was a slave to it, and it had to happen.
So what inspired you to write it? What made you have to express it? If this is personal, that's fine. I'll respect it.
No.
I'm just asking, what made a 14-year-old girl have to delve into such a world of creativity, in a big world that you created?
Yeah.
That desire to be so strong in such a child who's I'm sure had friends in the community and a family. I mean, I'm sure there was activities. I mean, you chose to write a book. So
yeah.
What was that?
I stupidly chose to have it all, which is very, very hard to balance. But as I said, I was that really mousy, really anxious, timid kid. And I was such a perfectionist, as you know, with the headings and the fonts. Like, everything. I just agonized over everything. And the written word was the only escape that worked. That and movies, but the written word was the one place where my mind just left everything else. And I would close those books and I would imagine other stories that I hadn't read. They were mine, and eventually I just had to start telling them myself, and that became the place that I could get lost.
Yeah. Did you have a lot of support or help from family and teachers, or who saw a young girl with this committed passion like to this story? Did you show teachers? Did you share it around? Did you get advice?
There were other teens who liked writing, and we would talk about it, but I just have a lot of really supportive friends and family. Some of them like reading. A lot of them don't really care as much as what I did about it. Like, it meant something different to me. But it's just I'm surrounded in complete, like, cheer squad. I could be a professional elephant cleanup. I don't know. I could be anything, and they would think that I'm doing the best in the world. And, like people like my mum that would read a brick.
Yes.
That is support.
Well, that's good. That's good. Yeah, I was just saying, because you're such a young age, you're evolving to, I mean, year 12 and university and graduations, and then your life starting as a teacher, and this book followed you all the way through those development years. So that's impressive. So well done. And I just wanted to delve into the ideas of that, because not a lot of people start that young. A lot of people start later in life, when they feel they've got stories to tell, when they feel that life experiences have given them the maturity to be have the perspective to write something like in a reasonable objectivity. So no, you did really well with that.
Thank you.
So just trying to think, like, what would your favorite author be? Is your own books, like you've got a style of writing, is that something you read, that sort of genre, or is there other genres? Like, what's your favorite author?
Oh, as a teacher, I'm often reading books that I wouldn't normally pick up myself. I'm very much fantasy, or just really light reads. Yep. Because when I get home, I just don't want to be thinking too much more.
Yep.
But one of my I loved, the Shadowhunters series and Aragon, and but one of the absolute favorite authors that I've ever had is her name is Megan Whalen Turner. Okay. And she wrote the Thief series, and she is just the most witty, like you were talking about leaving little breadcrumbs before. This woman is a genius. Her story just is captivating. I've read it a million times. I will always find gemstones in there.
Awesome. Okay, very good. So if, out of curiosity again, if the book gets turned into a movie and Peter Jackson's available to, give it its Lord of the Rings, mastery.
Nice.
Who do you see playing actors for your characters? Like, who's the actors you would want to play your characters? I'm sorry, I said that wrong. Yeah, so does that make sense? So who in the movie would be the best actors you visualize?
This is going to sound weird, but those mannequins or those little figurines that are faceless and they're kind of creepy?
Right, yes.
Did you know those?
I'm not sure
I've got this blurry vision of what my characters look like, but I don't have exact. When I was doing my own covers for the second book, The Raiden, which is Dallin, I knew that he was, kind of tall, dark and handsome, and the photograph that I selected for the cover just happened to look down the track exactly like my fiance. So I was thinking, where'd I get that inspiration?
Well, they do have those boards, isn't it? The vision boards, that you create. Yes. You do have one of those. Do you put those up, or do you try to find images of the places you're writing about?
Sometimes just when I've travelled or been to different places or seen different things, that's where the natural or the landscaping description comes from. Yep. I guess that's what I had to hone back, Yeah.
Okay. No, I asked that question. It's always interesting as a writer, because we visualize our books, I think, as well as authors. We see, and very clearly, a lot of the dynamics of our books. So when it comes to the film options and opportunities, I know a lot of famous authors have always been disappointed with the film versions of their books, or the actors that are cast in their books, because they're so ingrained in the design of their character in their head.
Yeah.
I think I remember one predominantly was Anne Rice. Very upset. Tom Cruise got cast in her.
Oh, he was so good.
It wasn't turned out
perfect,
but she was mortified because it was not in the way that she visualized the character. Yeah. And of course, at the time, the film also had to sell, and of course that helps. But I thought he did really good, and very brave role for him as well at the time. That's why I was asking that question. So I agree that actors and visualizations, but to have someone say you have an actor or they have no face in your mind is interesting. So I like that answer. So next questions, or do you have any other? Do you have any other questions?
Now I'm just imagining creepy, blurry-faced figurines.
That's right. So now you said you explained the names of your characters. Is it when you were 14, as you say, it's young, but there's no actual way of picking your characters' names, or they just come to you? Or how did you say you had to
at the time, there was a lot of Googling of...
I was going to say, because there's a very interesting names. Like they are.
There are lots...
Very creative names.
But not really, because I just went through history and names that had meaning, you know, and now, because it's been so long, I don't remember. But at the time I thought, oh yes, this name so suits this personality. And now I've got no idea what I was on about. The only original ones are the three, and the Larnerity, yeah. Which is the trickiest one.
That is a challenging word. But the funny thing was, when I read Tolkien when I was younger, I didn't realize until I actually saw the films, and it wasn't the Peter Jackson ones, but the earlier ones in the 80s that they did on TV movies. I didn't realize I was actually saying all the names wrong. Like, because I was reading it, because you don't verbalize it. Like, it's like, if you're reading what do you think it is? And so naturally, you know, Aragon and all the names that came out later, when I went, oh, that's how it's pronounced, because I was calling it Agoran, or, you know, so it's how you read it.
Yes.
So, you know, it's interesting with your book. We'll have to, we might have to do an audio training session for some of the readers so they can help pronounce it. So,
I only put in a pronunciation guide, especially because that was the one thing people kept saying had really got to them, that the names were so complicated. And in my head, I thought, say it how you want to say it. I don't mind, but they want to know.
Yes. No, that's right. It's good. I like the way that you've included that breakdown for the pronunciations as well. So paused, commas, and I went, oh, that helps me too. So what would you call your kryptonite? So if you had a writing kryptonite, what is that?
Oh, it's when I do finally set aside time for writing, then I just can't do it. Isn't that terrible? Yeah.
So would you call that a writing block, or a challenge in the sense that you've now got all that information, but you just don't know which part to put in, start in, you know?
I think the pressure helps when you feel like you've got time. All the other things that have been wearing you down suddenly catch up, and you just feel brain dead. And that burning desire that normally pushes you into that sparking kind of like bubble of ideas is now it's just feeling like you're slogging through, and it's harder, and I achieve less than I would if I was just letting it flow when the time was right.
Yep.
Which is a shame.
Well, mine's the nap. Yeah, it's like whenever I think about writing, I go, "Yep, I'm gonna write," and I'll just have a 10-minute brainstorm on the couch, just get my head clear and relax and meditate,
but not upright.
I'll be out for 30 minutes, and I'll be like, "Yeah, that was a good writing session."
That's called self-care and dreaming. You know, manifesting your dreams.
Yeah, I've just got to work out a way to make sure that the writing's more than the self-care. Because the self-care doesn't really write a lot. So if you had, if you were in your world you created, like as I said, you were maybe not even one of the characters, but one of the things I'm curious of is what would your spirit animal be in your world? Or it could be the real world. You can have a spirit animal here. You'd be a monkey, a lion.
That's really tricky. I'm not sure. I guess if I was in my world, the typical one would be the unicorn, but I think I'd maybe, even though I don't really like spiders, I love her so much that maybe I'd be the Granks.
You'd be the spider.
Maybe.
Very cool. So what would you say for you is your most interesting writing quirk? Like, some writers have to have their laptop in a certain way, their seat a certain height, they have to have a certain pen, they have to have a certain pad, they have to have a certain, you know, an environment. What is your writing quirk? Do you write to ABC newscasters to dictating the Test cricket, so it has to have background noise? What is your quirk?
I think music has often, or even just the video clips of music, sitting in a nail salon where your fingers are you're trapped, and all you can see are these clips. I find music and visuals very inspiring, and when I'm watching them or hearing them, it means so much and it creates so much energy in me. And then I try to start writing, and if I've got any sound, I cannot tolerate it. So the thing that inspired me suddenly becomes the thing that distracts me. But maybe a quirk for someone who is ridiculously perfectionist and needs everything so set out is that when it comes to my writing, I just have in this one little tiny notepad all these words everywhere, or on serviettes, like the messiest notes you've ever seen in your life. And then later I've got to decipher what the heck I was on about.
Yep. So
just buzzwords.
Yep. So is that your quirk? You just think you're a jotter, you're a noter, you're a scribbler, a scriber. If you're in a cave, you'd have it all over the walls.
Yes. Yeah. If I could. Yeah. My dad, when he's driving to work, if someone calls him and he's got to remember it, he always wears the kind of tradie shorts. He'll just put a buzzword on his leg in a pen. I would probably do that if I could.
You're driving in class. Excuse me, kids. Just riding on my arms. So very good. So now we'll finish it up. And one question I want to ask, and this is a task that most writers find challenging, and it's the bigger writing question. I hope it's probably not as challenging for you, but I know a lot of writers have had it. So I'm building it up. Does that work? Yeah. Feel the anticipation?
It's scaring me, actually.
Yeah. So you ready? Okay. So what do you find the hardest thing about writing a character in the opposite sex? Most challenging? Like, what's the hardest thing for you writing an opposite sex character?
Because this series is in first person and each chapter is one of the three, I think I didn't distinguish the voices as easily as I would have liked to. I think sometimes, unless you have paid very particular attention to the chapter, maybe voice was something that held me back a little bit. I let them blur.
So the boys and girls sounded similar in their way, their toning, or the writing? Maybe,
yeah. I think once Kiana opens up a bit and their friendship develops, maybe that becomes more of a thing.
But you were 14. I mean, you weren't really identified to opposite sexing like boys and girls and understanding the dynamics fully. But even as an adult, even as you get older, don't get me wrong, it's a hard task for writers to do.
Well, I think really since then I've thought maybe don't write first person if you're going to have different perspectives.
Probably not. And one thing, do you hear a lot? You've published these before and had that experience. And do you hear a lot back from readers still? Do you hear feedback and how you communicate with your readers if you do get engaged with that?
Not massively, and I would love to. I think every writer's probably just dying to know what people think. So I've heard back from some people, and when I push them a little bit, I'm like, oh really, what did you think of this? Or then I get more information, and I'd just love to hear from people.
Okay, good. Well, I'm sure we'll help you create that impression, and thank you, Shelley, for your time tonight. And yeah, we look forward to your book coming out very soon. It's in December 15th. It'll be in stores, and so we'll have big things hopefully set up for you, and you'll be out talking to more readers.
I hope so.
So we appreciate that, and thank you again, and we look forward to talking further to you about the next books in the series. But yeah, have a great time, and thank you for your inspirational talk and talent.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed that.